Hi everyone. I think we're going to get started here. So if you want to hear about the R plan update or our project update, this is the room. So I'll make sure everybody's in the right place. I'm going to be the moderator today. My name is Mick Baird. I'm Vice President of Development for Invenergy. For those of you that don't know Invenergy, we're a independent power producer based out of Chicago. We've done about 14,000 megawatts of wind, gas, solar, even battery storage projects over the last 12 or so years. We've got offices in Denver, Toronto, and Mexico City, and we've been active in Nebraska for about 8 years. And we've got about 310 megawatts operating here in Nebraska. So welcome, and I'm here to introduce Mr. Tom Kent, who's going to give an update on the R plan. Mr. Kent is Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of NPPD. He graduated from University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in 1985. Received a master's degree in business administration from University of Nebraska in 2005. He's also completed the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations Reactor Technology course for utility executives at MIT. He joined the district in May of 1990 as Environmental Qualification Coordinator of Cooper Nuclear Station. Mr. Kent's also held the positions of Retail District Manager, Retail Regional Manager, Retail Customer Care Manager, Chief Information Officer, Corporate Planning and Risk Manager, and Transmission and Distribution Manager. He currently sits on the RMEL Board of Directors and on the Southwest Power Pool Members Committee and Human Resources Committee. He is also a district chairman for the Boy Scouts of America. He spent 4 years on active duty as a commissioned officer in the United States Navy, and he was appointed as Vice President and Chief Operating Officer in May 2011. And then one thing that, as Tom and I were talking, that I've learned about him in his spare time, not only with the Boy Scouts, he is a high school football referee, and so this is the season where he keeps active in doing that also. So please help me and welcome Mr. Kent.
So thank you. Good morning. A couple things from that bio that you probably know about me. I can't keep a job, right? And I'm evidently blind. So there you go. Football. There you go. All right. No, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I do really enjoy those fun activities, and this is a great time of the year. Not only because it's football season, but because the Cubs won the World Series. So I'm a huge Cubs fan, too. Yay, Cubs. All right. There's 2 of us in the room. Wanted to give you an update on where we are with the R project. We'll have time to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation and talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing in terms of public involvement as we've gone through this process and some of the areas that we're working on. Start just a little bit. The R project's a 345,000 volt transmission line project that runs from Gerald Gentleman Station near Sutherland, Nebraska, generally to the north. It interconnects at a substation in Thedford, Nebraska, and then runs generally to the east and will interconnect with a WAPA 345 kV transmission line. It's the line that runs from Grand Island north into South Dakota, and it'll interconnect in southern Holt County, kind of on the county border, south of Clearwater, Nebraska. This project came through the integrated transmission planning process of the Southwest Power Pool. It was approved in 2012. It's about a 225-mile long project. We started our public involvement process in 2013. We announced a final line route in January of 2015, almost 2 years ago. The R project's being developed to meet 3 needs, 3 benefits, basically, and that's where the R comes from. People ask, well, why'd you name it the R project? This is the real reason, and I'll show you the engineer's version in a second, but it has to do with reliability. This project will improve the reliability of the transmission system within the state of Nebraska and within the whole region. Gives us an ability to transmit large amount of electricity from west to east and help with north to south transfers as well, so to reduce congestion in the transmission system, allow us to use the resources in the systems more effectively. And it also provides the opportunity for potential development of renewable resources. We're here at a wind and solar conference, seen a lot of presentations about renewable resources, and no transmission has to be part of that equation in areas where transmission doesn't exist or where it's fully utilized. So that is the 3 R's: reliability, reduce congestion, and enable the potential development of renewables. So here's a map of the project. So now I'll give you the engineer's reason why it's called the R project. The engineers in the room will say, well, this looks like an R. Okay. So I like the other reason better, but we actually talked about that one as well. Okay. So the green line is the final line route of the R project. It starts here at Gerald Gentleman Station, just south of Sutherland Reservoir. There's North Platte. Transitions to the north. It'll follow Highway 83 quite a ways and interconnect in Thedford, Nebraska at a substation in Thedford. This is an important part of the reliability because there's a transformer that will be added at Thedford that will allow us to interconnect and create another strong source for the underlying 115,000 volt system, which will improve the reliability and the ability to deliver energy into the north central part of the state. This was a big issue for us in 2012 with the drought. We had difficulty with the transmission system that was configured at that time, getting enough energy into that part of the state. So this project will help improve that. We just recently finished a project that goes from Hoskins near Norfolk to Neely to a new substation that is providing another good source to bring energy into that north central part of the state from the east side. And this will be from the west side. Then it'll move along and end up interconnecting again with the WAPA line here, southwest of Clearwater. Clearwater's right there. This map also shows the original study area in light gray, and then the corridors that we looked at in white as we went through this process. We go through a multi-year process with many rounds of open houses, getting feedback from the public and landowners and other interested parties about this project. We explained the need of the project, why we're doing the project, the reason it was brought forward, and we also do a lot of listening. We want to learn about land use, how people are going to use their land, what kind of concerns and implications there might be. We start this process with a large study area. Again, that's the gray. And we look at that as a potential area where we can meet the needs of the project and give us plenty of room to fine-tune and learn to find potential routes that will minimize impact as we go through this process to route and site this transmission line. Go through a round of open houses, get a lot of feedback, use that information to start to narrow down the area we're going to look at for that possible future transmission line. Okay, so after that process, we end up with corridors, and that's the area in white. And these are areas that we're going to continue to work on and learn more information, get more feedback, to look for possible locations of a transmission line route in those corridors that, again, will meet the goals of the project and minimize impact as much as we can. Go through another round of open houses, another round of public process, get more feedback, learn more information, and we narrow down to alternate routes. So we start drawing lines between points at that point. This map only shows the final route, but we do look at many alternatives. Go through another round of open houses, talk about those alternatives, and again use that information to help narrow down to the route that we believe will minimize impact. Then we finish the process off with a round of public hearings. Held 8 public hearings for this project, and in those public hearings we go through all the explanation of why this project's needed, why it's important, explain the process we went through, explain why we selected the route we did, and then after those hearings are done, we take any feedback from those hearings, make any final adjustments, and we announce the final route, which is the route you see in green today. So in terms of current status of the project, We've located all of the section corners we need. Section corners are important. That's early in the process where we're first getting permission rights to get on landowners' property. We have to find the section corners so we can do all the surveying we need to tie down the route locations so we can write easements to acquire our easement rights for the route. We have about 66% of the easement packages released for acquisition. That means they're out in the field in the hands of our agents, and our agents are working with the landowners, going through those packages and negotiating for final easement rights with the landowners. As of November 2nd, we about 27% of our easements have been acquired. It's pretty good for where we are in this project. We've also completed a draft habitat conservation plan. This project is going through the Sandhills of Nebraska. The Sandhills of Nebraska are the home of the American burying beetle, which is a listed endangered species. So we determined early on in the project that we needed to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to get what's called an incidental take permit to allow us to construct, operate, and maintain that project over its life. Part of that process is we develop a habitat conservation plan that explains what mitigation things we're going to do, how we're going to construct the line, a lot of things about the line so that we can protect that species. That's in the hands of the Fish and Wildlife Service right now, and they're reviewing it. They have a pretty significant process that they have to go through. At some point, they'll issue a draft environmental impact statement. That environmental impact statement will be available for public comment. I believe they're going to hold some public meetings around that environmental impact statement. They'll use the comments from that to determine their final environmental impact statement and ultimately issue their recorded decision down the road, their biological opinion, and give us a permit to construct the project. The final line route, I said, was announced in January 2015. We started easement acquisition in December 2015. We anticipate that we will get that incidental take permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service based on their current schedule next fall, September, October time frame. We will not start construction until we have that permit in hand, and it's going to take us 21 to 24 months to construct the line. Okay, so I will be reviewing our schedule with our board later this week, and we'll announce a new schedule based on that review, but you can do the math. You probably got a good idea of what we're looking at for an in-service date based on what I just told you. A little bit more about the public involvement process. So we go through 3 rounds of open houses. We held 18 open houses in total. Okay. We had 8 public hearings, 1 in each county, where the route will go through. 1,700 individuals attended the public meetings and hearings. Now, you know, we count those individuals twice. We might have had the same individual at every one of those hearings and meetings, but a total of 1,700 people. 8 newsletters sent out to over 3,500 landowners as we've gone through the process, and there'll be more newsletters as we continue to go through the rest of the project. We still have a lot of communication that we will continue to do with the landowners as we work through the remaining phases of the project. We got to finish easement acquisition. We'll do some meetings and discussions when we select who the contractors are, so the landowners will get a chance to meet and the public will get a chance to see who the contractors are going to be, those kinds of things. We'll do meetings with various stakeholders at that point in time as well. In addition to all these meetings, we had 44 other meetings with community leaders, local elected officials, county boards, village boards, city councils, other entities along the line route that may have an interest or have been impacted in some way. And that will continue as well as we move through the project. Through this process, we received and evaluated over 2,500 public comments. We had over 50 different routing criteria that we reviewed as we went through the process to start with a study area and end up with a final line route that we believe minimizes impact. And we'll continue to work with the landowners. Today, as we go through the easement acquisition process, we're continuing to work with the landowners, and we're continuing to make minor adjustments that make sense to them and us that will further minimize the impacts of the route on their property. So things that we might look at is shelter belts. Is there a way that we can adjust the line route to avoid a shelter belt so that we don't have to take down the trees? Trees and transmission lines don't mix, right? adjustments around structures, building, future land use, those kinds of things. Next week, I will be spending the week in the field with my boss, Pat Pope, the Chief Executive Officer for NPPD, and we have there's like 9 or 12 meetings that we'll be having with the landowners on the line route, small group meetings. Give us a chance to give them an update on the project and also us a chance to listen to their concerns. We want to make sure that we give them an opportunity in a small environment where we can have a good discussion, a good dialogue, to listen to their concerns, answer questions they might have, and quite frankly, hopefully I want to be able to start to correct some of the misconceptions that are out there about this project. We're going to talk about some of those as we go through the rest of this presentation. So this project's gotten a lot of attention in the social media. There's certainly a group of people that are opposed to the project. Some of them are landowners, some of them are not. There's a group of people that are opposed to wind development in the Sandhills, and some of them are the same people. So there's kind of an overlap in terms of the opposition. Some are opposed to the project because of what they think could happen with future wind development. Some are opposed for different reasons. But the whole concept of wind development in the Sandhills and this project have kind of gotten blended in some ways and created some concerns in some circles. The social media encourages activism and involvement from the public. You know, quite frankly, I think activism and involvement is a good thing. Right? We started early on with the goal of getting a lot of public involvement, and we certainly are not shying away from that, and we want to continue that as we go through the rest of this project. So, wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we see and hear in the public media, some of the myths, so to speak. One of the things that's been circulating around there as a misconception is that we're also planning to build a T-line and a U-line. Okay? So, a little bit about the T-line. We did discuss several years ago, this would have been in the 2009-10 time frame, the potential to build another line from that corner area to the west. That line was discussed with NPPD, it was discussed with the transmission planning organizations in the state of Nebraska, it was even mentioned at the Southwest Power Pool. Never went anywhere. Never got any traction. Couldn't show that there's value in doing that line that was more, the benefit was better than the value, or than the cost. Let's put it that way. Couldn't show that the benefit of the line being built was better than the cost it would take to build it. So it died. Never went anywhere. The U line, quite frankly, I have no idea. Never been discussed. I saw a picture out on social media that someone put out there that represented what the U-line might look like. Doesn't make any sense. Nothing we would ever do. So there's concerns about the impacts of the construction of the line. Those are valid concerns. We've been working with the landowners and will continue to work with the landowners to address those concerns. We're looking at different construction methods to further minimize impact of the construction of the line. My goal and our team's goal is to minimize impact as much as we can when we build the line. The less impact you have when you build the line, the less restoration work you have to do. And so that's better in the long run for everyone. So one of the other things out there is you can't build and maintain high voltage lines in the Sandhills. Well, we have and we do. We have over 140 miles of 345 kV line, over 300 miles of 115 kV line. And it's not just us. WAPA has both 115 and 345 kV lines that exist in the Sandhills, as does Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. So this is not the first time we've worked in the Sandhills. It's not the first time we've built a line in the Sandhills. It's not the first time that we've operated and maintained a line in the Sandhills. So we're coming at this with some experience. This is another thing that we hear a lot about, and that all the power coming through the transmission line goes out of state. not really true. It's more complicated than that. You saw some of this yesterday if you went to the presentations about the Southwest Power Pool. The utilities in Nebraska, the generating utilities in Nebraska, OPPD, LES, NPPD, Tri-State, we all participate as members of the Southwest Power Pool. So what happens every day is we are in an energy market where the energy that we produce is sold into that market. Just like a farmer selling their corn in the market. That farmer also raises cattle or raises hogs or whatever they're going to buy feed, right? So the energy we buy to serve our load all comes from that market. 100% of the energy we make gets sold in the market. 100% of the energy we use to serve our load comes back from that market, and that market provides a transparent way to set prices. The reality of the physics is that energy is going to flow from generator load, and it's going to follow the path of least resistance. So most of the energy that's made in Nebraska probably is actually consumed locally, but based on the physics of what's going on. But that's not how the market works economically. Okay? The fact that we're improving the reliability of the system, the fact that we're reducing congestion in the system provides direct benefits to Nebraskans, and that's why we're doing this project. Okay. Again, this point about damage to the Sandhills, it's something that we're concerned about. It's something that we're working with the landowners on. And it's something we believe we can manage, again, working with the landowners, and it's something that we have experience managing. It's going to take time. We talked about this during the hearing process. We work with an expert from the University of Nebraska that supported us during the hearing process, and a lot of how fast this recovery happens when you have to deal with damage has to do a lot with weather and how cooperative the weather is. Obviously, in dry years, it's a lot harder to restore grass than it is in wet years. So I'm going to give you some examples of projects where we've had to deal with damage and restoration. The first one is the Erickson Substation site. This is a picture of the site in April of 2012, which would have been shortly after it was graded. It was a site that was, we acquired. We owned this property at that time. And it was going to be the future substation for some of the facilities that we needed to build to support the TransCanada Keystone XL project. The project got canceled. We were told to stop work shortly after this, so we set about to restore and cover on that site, and it took us a while. If you remember the summer of 2012, it was a very dry, hot summer, so it took a while and it took some care to get some good cover growing back on this site. Here it is this summer. Okay, so we've made some significant progress. We have since sold this site to a private landowner. This is a restoration project on the Thedford to Ainsworth 115 kV line. This is in 2013 again. This is a blowout that is encroaching on the transmission line. Okay, so it's moving towards the transmission line, and so it was becoming a concern for us from a structural standpoint with the line. Here it is in October 2016. Not perfect, but certainly much better than it was 3 years ago. So again, showing where we've actually done work to try and deal with restoring damage. This is a line or a transmission line that goes from Maxwell to Thedford. This is north of Maxwell, if I believe, along a road. You can see the blowout here. Here's the road. And again, this blowout is encroaching on this already existing transmission line. So again, we're concerned about the potential reliability impacts on the line. Here's another picture, September 2014, and you can see where this is cut into close to the structure foundation. And so we had to bring in a bunch of dirt and fill and reshape that, put matting and grass seed and all those kinds of things on there to do the restoration process. And here it is in the summer of 2016. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we've been wrapped into some of the wind development projects that are going on up there in terms of the opposition, and you know that's just the way it is. Okay, Some of the other things we've seen in social media is that we're going to be taking over 1 million acres for the wind farm. We have no involvement with the wind farms in Cherry County. We do talk to wind developers. We have talked to the Cherry County Wind Association because as the transmission provider, that's our job. As a transmission owner, our job is to provide interconnections when a developer of a power plant goes through the process. So it'd be irresponsible for us not to talk with wind developers. This project, however, is not being done for any specific wind developer. It's certainly one of its needs, one of its benefits is it'll enable the development of wind if that happens, or renewable resources if that happens. But if no renewable resources are developed along this project route, the project is still needed and the project will still get constructed. It's needed for reliability benefits and it's needed to reduce congestion in the transmission system. The wind developers in the room will tell you, as I will tell you, that they don't have the ability to use eminent domain in Nebraska to facilitate their projects. We can't use our ability for eminent domain for their projects. Our ability for eminent domain is to provide services that we need to provide, whether it's transmission service to interconnect one of their projects or whether it's a new power plant that we have to do. And we have to go through a process that requires many approvals, including the Nebraska Power Review Board, in order to be able to do that. It has to be based on meeting the needs and benefits. MPPD is taking the water rights in Cherry County? No, we're not. In fact, we do have senior water rights on the Niobrara River, and we're in the process of working with the natural resource districts through some legislation that was passed to transfer those water rights to the NRDs and retire our hydro plant that's on the Niobrara River. So we don't see any reason for us to get any more water rights. We want the mineral rights in Cherry County. As a political subdivision of the state of Nebraska, we're very limited on what we can and can't do, and we would have no ability, nor do we want anyone's mineral rights. That's not the business we're in. We're in the business of generating electricity reliably and safely and low cost for our customers, and that's the business we're authorized to be in. So we couldn't do this even if we wanted to. Okay, so there's certainly concern about eminent domain and whether we will use that and what that looks like. We spend a lot of time in the public process talking about that. Eminent domain is the absolute last thing we want to do. We very, very much want to find a line route that we can acquire voluntarily. And if you look at our experience in doing transmission projects, we are very good at that. We are over 98, 99% plus getting voluntary easements on our transmission projects. Our last 2 transmission projects that we completed, one this year and one 2 years prior to that, and actually three transmission projects now, all 100% voluntary easements. We have the ability to use eminent domain if we have to. Again, we don't want to. Early in this process, which is kind of where we've been, we needed to get on landowners' property to do all the surveying activities that we needed to do in order to prepare the easement documents, finish engineering, design, etc. The state statutes allow us to do that for those specific situations under specific conditions. We were challenged in court about whether those state statutes were applicable, and the courts issued an opinion that said that they were, and we were within our rights to do what we needed to do. So, even though the courts have affirmed that we have the right to do these surveying and engineering activities, we're still working with the landowners. We're still talking to the landowners. We still want to make sure we do the right thing and the best we can to develop a relationship with the landowners. That transmission line is going to be there for a long, long time, a lot longer than I'm going to work. And so everything we can do to have a good relationship with the landowners is important to us for the long-term line and relationship. In this process, if we cause any damages, we're required to pay for those damages. If there's a storm in the future, say 20 years from now there's an ice storm and we have to go in and repair the line. If we cause any damages when we're doing that, we'll have to compensate the landowners and pay them for those damages. So this doesn't give us, carte blanche, right? It's still the landowner's property. All we're asking for is an easement that allows us to build, operate, maintain a line across their property The restrictions are fairly minimal. They can't do things like stack hay under the line. They can't build big structures under the line, things that have to do with really with safety as much as anything. They can't plant trees under the line, again, a safety issue. But they can still use it for other activities. If they're a row crop farmer, they can still farm under it. If they're a rancher, they can still graze under it. They can still use and enjoy that land much the way they always have. It's not 100% the same. We're taking some of their rights, obviously, but we're compensating them for those. I think I answered this question already. This isn't being constructed for any particular wind project. It's being constructed to meet the needs of the project. Reduce congestion, improve reliability, enable the future development of renewable resources if that comes. That question on the third one will depend a lot on what those local areas decide they want to do, what the landowners decide they want to do with their property, what the county commissions decide that they're going to have for regulations. That's not up to us. Talked about this one. Okay, we've had through the process several alternative line routes proposed to us as part of the process, both before we announced the final line route and after. The Fish and Wildlife Service, in their review process, they look at alternatives to the project, and so they reviewed some alternative line routes as part of their project. In all cases, we've provided feedback and provided information to explain why those alternatives weren't as good as the alternative that we proposed. In the case of this particular one, why not place the line further south and basically start at Stapleton and then go to the east? The bottom line here is we have that reliability need we need to fulfill in Thedford. We need to make that interconnection in Thedford with the underlying system. Thedford's north of Stapleton, we need to go to Thedford, and that's really the bottom line from a reliability standpoint. There's also the statement that I've heard several times is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is going to force us to change the line route. They do have responsibility and authority of the incidental take permit process. They will issue a biological opinion and give us a permit at some point in the future. We have a lot of work to do with them yet, but in their authority in this process, they have no ability or any authority to alter the line route. Okay, they'll look at things like mitigation methods and construction methods and all those kinds of things. But this process does not give them the ability to move the line route. It doesn't exist. They know that. We know that. We're still working with them to get through the process to make sure that our habitat conservation plan does what it needs to protect the endangered species. So, questions?
Yeah, so Tom can take questions now, and I guess before, and the mic is there, so step up there, but before anyone does, I guess I have a question I'll throw out there. SPP, I think on one of the slides it was noted that SPP approved the project in 2012. Yes. So what involvement does SPP have in that process ahead of all of the public, outreach and line routing efforts that you've undertaken since that approval from SPP? How do they get involved in that process?
It's an excellent question. So SBP is a regional transmission organization, and one of their responsibilities as a regional transmission organization is they do regional planning for all the members. Now each of the members, like NPPD, has a transmission planning group that participates in that process, but SBP is the entity that's responsible for doing the long-term transmission plans for the entire region. So this project came up through their planning process. It was identified and vetted through all the different organizations through SPP with a group of projects that the SPP board awarded in 2012 and said, okay, these are projects that need to be done to meet our goals. And they look out on it, for this particular group, they looked out on a 10-year horizon and they said, based on what's going on, what we see happening with generation needs, what we see happening with load growth, what we see happening with renewable developments, This is what's going to have to happen to the transmission system in order to reliably deliver electricity to the entire region in that period. And that's where these projects came from. Once they identify the project need and award the project to the transmission developer, in this case to NPPD, then it's up to us to go through all the processes to get state permits, routing, construct, all those kinds of things. At the end of the day, the cost of this project are shared across all the SPP members. For a project of this size, the entire membership basically pays their load ratio share. So while we finance it and pay for it up front, ultimately NPPD's customers will pay for about 5% of it. The rest of it will come from the SPP footprint. Answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. Audience questions. There's the mic in the middle of the room. Maybe step up and.
Tom, out of curiosity, how many other projects were let at that time within the whole SBP footprint? You know?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but the Neely Hoskins project was led at that same time, which is the one that we just completed. There was some in Kansas and Oklahoma. There's a big number. And so we share in those costs as well. So those costs are spread for all those projects across the whole footprint. So we're paying for part of those as well. Answer your question as best I could without the facts?
How many projects were awarded?
I don't remember. It was a good sized number. I can find out and tell you. I just don't know off the top of my head. Yes.
Tom, thank you for your presentation. You answered a lot of questions. I liked the fact and fiction piece of it. And also thank you for your service to the United States and all the veterans this week. It's really an honor to work with people who have served.
Thank you.
I've always wanted this to be called the minivan plan because if you go to the end of it, it looks like a minivan. And minivans carry a lot of things and nobody likes them. So could have renamed it. I'm not an engineer.
I wish you're obviously a lot more creative than us engineers are. So.
And I was at some of those original meetings where Pat Pope talked about the plan. I really do think he engaged people early on what they need. And I remember the T plan. I think the T plan wasn't a bad idea. Why? That's what I want to ask you about. Why not take it west?
Well. The issue right now for going west is it's just not worth the additional cost. The benefits aren't there. And when the planners looked at it, they just didn't see the benefits being worth the cost to move it that way. You know, because you need to, no one that's a member of the Southwest Power Pool wants to pay for things that aren't really needed and don't really provide benefits, and that particular project never rose to that level.
My question is there transmission capability from your Fort Laramie coal-fired plant, additional usage? The reason I ask this question is because the area around Fort Laramie has some of the best solar insulation in the United States, outside of Arizona and so forth. The climatic conditions are like 20 degrees cooler, so there's less line resistance on moving electrons. And the other thing is, with the time shift, we could be generating solar in Wyoming and delivering it at 6:30 in Omaha, Nebraska, or eastern Nebraska. It's something that makes sense from the solar standpoint. The question is there capability to transfer those electrons from a solar farm in Wyoming over the lines into Nebraska?
Is there capability for additional transmission capacity to do this or that? And that gets asked a lot by a lot of people, and it's probably also the most difficult question to answer. Because to really understand whether the capability exists, it takes detailed engineering studies. It takes the SPP transmission planners working with utility transmission planners to do a lot of computer modeling and a lot of simulations to understand how the system will be impacted by load changes, new generation going away. And so that's part of their process that they go through. They go through a process with any new project. Once someone identifies, hey, I want to do this, they have to study that with other potential new projects and determine whether it can be done, how much it will cost for it to be done, what kind of impacts it will cause. So it's really, it's impossible for me to tell you whether there is additional capacity there on that line today to do that or not. People that are in the development business, what they have to do is they have to use some of those same computer models, do their studies, figure out whether there's the potential. They think there is, they get in the process, they take a little risk, and then they find out what it's going to cost to interconnect it. I would say it can always be interconnected. The question is, what's the cost? And the cost depends on what those studies tell you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning. You might have mentioned it. How much additional incremental capacity is this line going to add, and how much capacity renewables do you have in the queue on it right now?
So you just asked his question in a different way. So I'm going to give you his answer in a different way. The line is when SBP designs, or they don't design the line, when they determine what's needed, they'll say this, it has to be built to have this minimum transfer capacity, okay? And I don't remember off the top of my head what that is, but it's several thousand amps, okay? But what incremental capacity is available above what's needed to meet the existing requirements is something that gets studied, and it changes based on the dynamics of the system. So it's really hard to answer how much is additional. Everyone asks. It's a good question, but you got to go through the computer studies to really answer that question. And it'll change as load changes and generation changes. And then so how many projects are in the queue that might be using this transmission line was the second part of the question. I don't know the answer, but the queue's out there on SPP's website. I am only aware of one project that we've gotten a generator interconnection request for that's related to this, and it's clear on the east end where the whole county substation is. We, as the transmission owner, we don't get really engaged in a lot of this stuff until they get through the study process to the point where they want to do a generator interconnection, and that's where we get engaged, because that's where we start talking about how that'll impact us.
Thank you. Can you ballpark the incremental capacity?
Nope,
No.
I can't. Sorry.
Okay.
John Hanson with the Nebraska Farmers Union. I think it was really helpful because a lot of the discussion about the ARP plan has not clearly understood that this is, in fact, the Southwest Power Pool transmission build. And so now that we're in the Southwest Power Pool system, we're paying for other states in the Southwest Power Pool to build their infrastructure. So since we've been in, this is our first opportunity to actually have the other states help us build our infrastructure in Nebraska. So it's the first project. So from our standpoint, representing landowners, we prefer having public power build transmission for the Southwest Power Pool as compared to all of the other options. And the reason that we do is because that your track record in working with landowners is exceptional. So when I interface with my counterparts in all of the other states who deal with transmission issues and the conflicts between landowners and the building of transmission, when you compare that to Nebraska, Nebraska has far and away the best track record in the country. And to point out that point, when you guys built the system from Columbus to Lincoln, I got as many complaints from landowners that you were giving them too much opportunity to comment, too many meetings to go to, too much information in the mail, and you were being too transparent. For God's sakes, why don't you just build the line? And so, to a fault, you were working with landowners. So as we're going through this process of participating in the Southwest Power Pool, I want to compliment you for the outstanding track record that you have done in the past and that you are doing. And given all of our options, you are, in fact, doing the very best job, in our opinion, that could possibly be done. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the comments. Just to clarify a teeny bit, all the projects we've done, including the one from Columbus to Lincoln that Mr. Hanson mentioned, are being compensated for through the Southwest Power Pool. So our project isn't the first project, thank goodness. We've had several projects that were using this compensation methodology. And again, for the 300 kV projects and above, it's shared across the entire footprint. For projects smaller than that, 2/3 of it are paid for out of our zone and 1/3 of it's shared. Thank you for the comments, though. That was very nice. I didn't even have to pay him, I don't think.
Well, you're from Tilton.
Yeah, that helps. So, what else?
Any other questions?
You said you'd built the 345 through the Sandhills. Could you tell me where that was?
Yep. Hang on a second. So the 345 lines that NPPD owns that go through the Sandhills, and again, this is not our definition of Sandhills, and I know that people from different parts of the Sandhills are going to say, well, that's not the same as where I live, and that's probably true. All
Well,
right?
the Sandhills are the Sandhills. That's
So
what
in
they
the
are.
Sandhills, we have the Gerald Gentleman Station to Sweetwater line. There's 2 lines, Gerald Gentleman Station to Red Willow and Gerald Gentleman Station to Keystone. Those are all 345 kV lines that are in the Sandhills.
Well, maybe you better take a look at the Sandhill map, but anyway.
I got it right here.
Did you ever get paid for that Erickson that you did for the Keystone?
Yes, we did. The question is, did we get reimbursed from TransCanada for our investments we made to support the Keystone project? And the answer is yes, we got all of our money back.
And then you said earlier that the University of Nebraska gave their condolences to this project. I have a letter here dated December 3rd, 2014 from the University of Nebraska Great Plains Study, Rick Edwards, who does not agree with that. He says the proposed R-line transmission in north central Nebraska is ill-stated and contrary to the public interest and should be rejected. And he goes on to say that it's like Yosemite or Yellowstone. It's a pristine area and should be protected. And then also, when you had the Power Review Board meeting, you quoted the Fish and Wildlife, and there's a letter here dated to the Power Review Board that they did not condemn, and that the Power Review Board stated things that they said, and they did not say that. I just wanted to make those corrections.
Okay, so the University of Nebraska, I did not say that University of Nebraska condoned the line or supported the line. What I said was we had a professor from the University of Nebraska that's a rangeland expert that was with us at the hearings and provided us input and insight and support with answering questions with restoration. Okay. I am aware of the letter. And to the Power Review Board actions, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're referring to, but I'm sure you're reading from the transcripts from the hearing, and that's fine. With the Nebraska Power Review Board, we're required to get, or the Power Review Board, I should say, is required to get consultation from the State Game and Parks Commission when it comes to the Nebraska, I can't remember the exact term, but basically Nebraska's version of the Endangered Species Act. They did that. They accomplished that. The Power Review Board approved the project based on that feedback.
Well, the letter's dated February 24th, 2015 to the Power Review Board. I can get you a copy of it.
Oh, I probably have one. Thank you, though. There we go. I didn't know you were there. I should have just turned it over to you.
I was hiding. Tim Texel with the Power Review Board. I'm the executive director. What happened with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're only required to consult with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And we did that, and they gave us they did not oppose the project. It didn't threaten or harm any threatened or endangered species. We cited in our order some meetings that both U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Game and Parks Commission were at, and that Game and Parks gave the okay to the project, giving the implication that U.S. Fish and Wildlife did too. U.S. Fish and Wildlife took exception to that, and we wrote to them afterwards, and basically I said we will no longer cite to them as we don't need to. We only need to deal with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. So there was a possible implication in our order that U.S. Fish and Wildlife condoned the project, but we're only required to consult with the Game and Parks Commission in Nebraska. So any implication that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was in favor of the project or didn't oppose it was unintentional, and we've talked to U.S. Fish and Wildlife about that, and we just, as I said, will no longer be citing them in our orders. We didn't realize their exact involvement in it. So that was what happened with those two entities.
Thank you for clarifying, Tim. I do want to add that we are working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has authority over this project when it comes to the incidental take permit we're asking for. So we are going through a process with them, and we will have to work through them to develop a habitat conservation plan and mitigation measures that will meet their requirements and expectations when it comes to protecting the species. And we're committed to finishing that process. So it's not like we have to work with them, and we want to work with them, and we'll continue to work with them to get through the project. Thanks for the clarification, Tim. Anything else? Are we out of time?
Yeah, we're getting close. Any other questions? If not,
Oh, one more.
got one? All right.
Yeah, I'd just like to know how many extra substations are going to be put in there besides the beginning and the end.
The only substations that are associated with this project is an interconnection at the Gerald Gentleman Substation, which is next door to Gerald Gentleman. That's an existing substation. The Thedford Substation, which we're going to be adding some space and a transformer so that we can interconnect with the underlying 115 kV system there, and the new substation in Holt County. Those are the only substations associated with this project. Good. Thank you for your time. One plug for the end of the day. Go vote. This is our day to exercise our democratic rights. So.
Thank you.